All right, let's go. Welcome back, everybody. Get ready, because today we're diving deep into Godfather Part 3.
Ah, yes.
Now, I know this one can be a bit, well, divisive among Godfather fans, right?
Certainly a film that gets people talking, that's for sure.
Yeah, you guys send us tons of stuff about it. Articles, reviews, even some, like, personal notes. So obviously you're ready to unpack it all.
Well,
Legacy, the themes, does it even hold a candle to the first two,
right. All big questions. And honestly, it really does deserve a closer look, I think. At first glance, you might think it's just, well, more Michael Corleone, more of the same. But
Yeah.
the more you dig in, there's a lot going on under the surface. It might even be the most, introspective of the whole trilogy.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's just get right into it, Jen. So Michael Corleone, right? We see him, what, decades after Part 2, and he's different. But is it, like, really him changing or just trying to, I don't know, make himself look better?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? He's getting up there, late 50s, and everything he's done, it's weighing on him. He wants redemption, wants to go legit, find some peace.
And you can see how all that past, I mean, it literally surrounds him. Like that house, that compound at Tahoe, it's practically falling apart around him. You can practically smell the decay.
Visually, I think it's genius, a metaphor for his state of mind. He built this empire on violence, on being ruthless, and now he's literally living in the ruins of it all.
Yeah, like it's closing in on him,
Yep.
literally and figuratively. And it's not just the house, his family's a mess. Kay's still hurting big time. And their son, Anthony, wants nothing to do with the family business.
Absolutely. The family used to be his strength, what drove him, and now it's just more pain, more conflict. You see how much his choices have cost him, how much they've hurt the people he supposedly cared about most.
Yeah. And then you've got Vincent Mancini showing up, Sonny's son, the illegitimate one. It's like a blast from the past, like this raw energy, the kind of energy the family had back in the day.
Right. And he really throws a wrench in things. Could be the next in line, but he's also a reminder that violence, it just keeps coming back to haunt them. The cycle they can't escape.
There's this scene. Michael's giving Vincent advice, telling him not to let his emotions get the better of him. You almost feel like Michael's talking to himself, to a younger version of himself.
Yeah, and yet you can also see Michael's impressed. Vincent's got that ruthlessness in him, the thing that made Michael, well, Michael.
It's crazy, right? Wants to move away from the violence, but then he's like prepping Vincent to maybe take his place. It's like, can he even change who he is, even if he wanted to?
That's the struggle right at the heart of his character in this movie. Wants to be better, but that's not who he is.
And then you throw in this immobilier deal, right? He wants to buy this huge international company real estate, thinking that'll finally make the family money clean.
On paper, it sounds like what he wants, right? Legitimizing everything, cleaning up the family name, but
Yeah, but there's always a but with Michael Corleone, isn't there?
you got that right. The whole thing is just rotten to the core. Shady characters everywhere. Guys like Don Altobello, the old school mafioso. So cunning, you never know what he's gonna do next. It shows, even when Michael tries to go legit, he can't escape where he came from.
And then, bam,
Yeah,
the Atlantic City Massacre. That scene, it's brutal, it's shocking. A helicopter just opens fire on this meeting of mob bosses. I mean, Michael tries to stay away from the violence, but it always finds him.
that's a turning point for sure. The control Michael thought he had, it just evaporates. The violence, it's still his world, whether he likes it or not. And for Vincent, well, that's when things change for him. He gets ruthless, starts operating on his own terms.
Yeah, he definitely takes charge after that. It's like, is he protecting the family or just getting revenge? It gets kind of blurry.
Right, and that creates tension, right? Michael sees potential in Vincent, but also danger.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, then there's Vincent Mary, Michael's daughter. I mean, forbidden romance, right?
Yeah.
You just know it's not going to end well. Adds a whole Shakespearean tragedy element to it all.
Full of tension, the romance, the family drama, and it all leads up to what happens in Sicily with Anthony's opera debut.
Yeah, and speaking of Sicily, moving the story there, that's got to be important, right? Going back to the family's roots. But it also feels like things are about to get a lot worse.
Oh, for sure. And when Don Tomasino dies, Michael's old friend, that's when you know things are changing. Innocence is lost, and the violence, it's going to escalate big time.
And the way Coppola puts the opera, this beautiful, grand thing right next to the mafia stuff, that's pretty amazing.
It's masterful, yeah. High art, beautiful music, and then these cold-blooded murders all planned out. It's like, what's going on inside Michael? The beauty, the desire for something better, and then this ugliness, the life he's always known. It all comes to a head in that final scene at the opera. the assassinations, Mary's death, Michael just completely losing it. It's the culmination of everything he's done, the path he chose.
I mean, when she gets shot on those steps, it's just awful. You see her, the life just draining out of her. And Michael, that scream, it's like something primal,
Mm.
just heartbreaking.
In that moment, all the walls come down. He's not the Don, the cold, calculating guy. He's just a father who's lost his daughter.
Mhm.
It shows you, even someone like Michael Corleone, he's still human, vulnerable in the end.
It makes you wonder, though, was it an accident? Or did someone plan that, to get back at Michael? The film leaves it kind of open, doesn't it?
That's one of the things I find so interesting about part three. It doesn't wrap everything up neatly. It makes you think, makes you really consider the weight of Michael's choices, how they affect everyone around him.
Yeah. Speaking of choices, let's talk about the actors. I mean, Al Pacino, he's amazing as Michael. You see the exhaustion, the regret, how desperately he wants to be better.
Oh, he's brilliant. Every line on his face, the way he carries himself, you can just feel the weight of his past. So different from the younger Michael, the one who was just starting out.
And Diane Keaton, she's fantastic too. When they're together, even though it's obvious things are so messed up between them, you can still feel that tension, that connection.
That lunch scene in Sicily, so powerful. You can see those glimpses of love, but so much pain underneath, all the things that went wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have Andy Garcia as Vincent. He brings this like raw energy to it. You can tell he's both drawn to and kind of scared of Michael's world.
Totally. He
Yeah.
does such a great job showing both sides of Vincent, the love he has for Mary, the way he can be tender, but also that ruthlessness when he needs it.
Oh, and the supporting cast is great too. Eli Wallach is Don Altobello. Perfect casting. He's got that cunning, that slyness about him. You're never quite sure what he's thinking, what he's planning.
Like he's playing chess, always a few moves ahead.
All right, now I got to ask you about Sofia Coppola as Mary. I know her performance gets mixed reactions. Some people think she wasn't, up to it. Others really like the vulnerability she brought to the role. What do you think?
Yeah, she's definitely different from the other actors, I'll give you that. But I think it works. Mary's this young woman thrown into a world she doesn't really understand, and Sophia captures that innocence, that fragility.
I think she adds to the tragedy of it all. She represents like innocence lost, the violence that's always been there. It finally catches up to her, even though she tried to stay away from it.
That's a good point. And because she comes across as so vulnerable, that death scene, it hits you even harder. It shows that no matter how much you try to stay above it all, you can still become a victim.
And the visuals in this film, especially in Sicily, they're beautiful. Those scenes in the opera house are just stunning. You have that beauty, but then all this darkness happening underneath it all.
Coppola's a master at that, using visuals to tell the story. The Tahoe house crumbling, the landscapes in Sicily, the Vatican, all that richness, but you always have this feeling that something bad is coming.
Oh, and the music, Carmine Coppola's score, it's just incredible. The opera stuff, but also this melancholic feeling that runs through it all. You can feel the weight of it all.
It really shines during that climax, all that opera music. It adds to the drama, makes you feel like everything's just rushing towards this inevitable end. Like the characters are trapped in their own personal opera, a tragedy.
Speaking of opera, did you know Coppola didn't even want to make part 3 at first?
I did hear that, yeah.
He thought part 2 was the end, wrapped up the whole story. But then money issues, maybe some creative itch he needed to scratch.
That's right. But even though he wasn't sure at first, you can tell he put his all into it. He wasn't just rehashing the same old gangster stuff. He was trying to say something more about redemption, about what we leave behind, how power corrupts.
And I think he succeeded. Maybe part 3 doesn't have the same impact as the first two, but it's still a powerful film, a heartbreaking look at what happens to Michael in the end.
It definitely makes you think, challenges what you expect from a gangster movie. And you're right, it leaves you with more questions than answers.
So all that said, the themes, the actors, Coppola's vision, how do you think part 3 holds up on its own? If you take away the fact that it's a sequel.
You have to judge it on its own merits, definitely. It's not trying to be the same as Godfather or Godfather II. It's quieter, more about Michael's inner world, all the regret and sadness.
I agree. It's not perfect, but it's a fascinating look at this character, this icon. And it reminds you that even the most powerful people, they're still human. They can do good, they can do bad, and sometimes the bad wins out.
And that's what makes his fall from grace so tragic. He's trying the whole film to escape what he's done, but in the end, it destroys him in the worst way possible.
Yeah, you almost think of like Shakespeare or something. The ambition, the need for power, it brings him down, loses his family, his health. I mean, you could say he loses his soul.
Exactly. And that's what makes this movie different from, I don't know, other gangster movies. It's not just the violence, the fighting for control. It's about, I think, the compromises we make, our choices, how they affect us and how they affect everyone around us, even years later.
It's definitely one of those movies that stays with you.
Hmm.
Makes you think, makes you question things, your own values, how far you'd go to get what you want.
Yeah, I think that's what makes a film great, don't you? When it challenges you, pushes you to really think about things, leaves you with more questions than answers.
Definitely. And it's one of those films you can watch again and again, and you still see new things,
Yeah.
connect different dots. You understand the characters better, why they do what they do.
It also helps, I think, to know the background, the stuff that went on behind the scenes, the problems Coppola had, how they chose the actors. It all adds another layer to the experience.
Totally. Like knowing he didn't even want to make another Godfather movie, it makes you appreciate like how much effort went into making a story that felt new, different from the first two.
And casting Sofia Coppola, even though some people didn't like it, I think it makes Mary, more fragile, more vulnerable, and I think the film needed that.
It shows you, yeah, making movies, it's not just one person. It's a bunch of people coming together. And sometimes those weird choices, they really work.
So we've talked a lot about Godfather Part 3, the good, the bad. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
I'd say go into it with an open mind. Don't expect Godfather the second, This one, it's its own thing. It's quieter, more thoughtful. It's Michael at the end of his rope.
Yeah, and get ready for an emotional ride. It's exciting, it's sad, and it really gets you thinking.
Yeah. This is a movie that'll stick with you. It'll make you
Yeah.
think about the choices you make, about what you leave behind.
Well said. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive into The Godfather Part 3, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We'll be back soon with another classic film, ready to break it all down. So keep the conversation going and keep watching those movies.